staffing solutions. So we help you focus on what's most important, which is teaching and learning. And as you think about our session today, keep in mind that we have some really great individuals, and we'll be doing a chat session as well as, and I'll be sharing a little bit more about that in a moment. But I'm excited to be here, and I hope everyone is doing well. I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not sure if you're seeing it, but that's okay. There's really, again, a great opportunity for us to come together today. And first of all, I want to thank each and every one of the education leaders in the state of Florida and all that you have done to ensure that this time, which is basically unprecedented as we know, has been able to be managed in a way that allows us to continue with the work of teaching and learning. So thank you for all that you do, for your support of teachers, parents, and students. Also, I wanted to thank Kelly Education for allowing us to be a part of this as well and be a part of FASA. Kelly has been a part of Florida for many years, and they were excited about this opportunity. So we appreciate FASA and your commitment and stepping out and leading the rest of the country with this virtual conference. It is truly groundbreaking, and we're happy to be with you on this journey. So thank you, FASA. Also, I wanted to share some ground rules, that is, and that is for Zoom. You may be familiar already of the features as part of Zoom, but I'm required to share with you that you can interact several different ways through the chat feature, which allows you really to monitor not only what's being submitted, but also to submit your questions and your responses, as well as you can submit questions through the Q&A. And of course, there's the raise your hand feature. Ideally, we'd like you to use the chat or the Q&A just so that we don't have to manage the mute and unmute buttons. At the end of the session, of course, I will provide you with an exit ticket. So you'll be registered and it will show your attendance within the FASA system. So you'll get credit for that. And of course, if you haven't done so already, visit the Apple and the Play stores to download the FASA app. This will allow you to access the leaderboard and monitor what's going on there as far as prizes and any other updates. Of course, with social media, we want to let folks know all the fine work that's taking place here in the learning. So there's been a social media set up with the hashtag FASCONF. And of course, we'd like you to continue to share your experience and pictures with your networks using the hashtag on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So you'll also be able to follow through the FASA as well on conference updates. So as you think about transitioning, and if you think about where we are today with distance learning and having students at home, if you're like me and you have school-age children at home, I think you'll agree that this next session is especially relevant. And like myself, most parents have had to assist their children with the online assignments and accessing virtual instruction, assisting with technology challenges. And so those of us parents that were fortunate to retain employment but had to shift to working from home while acclimating to managing both distance learning and work from home have been exposed to a new paradigm. And so as a result, parents know more and will expect more from school leaders going forward. And so I think that what you'll find from today's session as you transform pre-K to meet the expectations and needs of a reimagined education system, we asked that you not only participate in today's session, but also reach out to Kelly Education and my colleagues for your back to school plans so that we can assist with any of those considerations going forward for either temporary or with substitute staffing. Today, our session is certainly one that we would like to begin to transition to right now by turning it over to Ryan and to Maria. But before I do that, I wanted to go ahead and share with you the bios for each one of them. So Ryan Dicing is the Executive Director of Innovation for Flagler County School District. He led the Flagler Digital Learning Movement to make Flagler County the first one-to-one school district in Florida. He is currently a board member of the Florida Association for Educational Data Systems and is a past board member for the Florida Council of Instructional Technology Leaders. His commitment to innovation, technology, and education is visible across the district and has led to various state and national recognitions, including being named Apple Distinguished District and most recently the 2019 ISTE Distinguished District Award. Also joining is Maria McGovern, and Maria is the District Technology Coordinator for Flagler County Schools. She has 26 years of experience in an innovative K-12 school environment and has assisted with opening 3 new schools. In her current role, Maria coordinates Flagler Technology Support Specialist team and works closely with the Flagler Instructional Technology team. She is a member of the International Society for Technology in Education, Florida Council for Instructional Technology Leaders, Florida Council for Instructional Technology Leaders, as I just said, as well as FASA. Maria has been married to her husband for 41 years, is a mother of 3 grown children, and 3 grandchildren. So I'd like to now turn the floor over to both Maria and to Ryan as they begin their session. Go ahead and stop sharing.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. As you can see, we've got a couple more team members from Flagler here that are with us. So if you could, guys, if you kind of want to jump in, we have Teresa Phillips, who's one of our digital coaches, who's been an integral part of as we've made this transition into supporting virtual or distance learning. And then also Amy Kopak, if you guys kind of want to just say hello and just a little bit about the stuff that you guys have been working on.
Hi, I'm Teresa Phillips. I used to be a teacher before I became a digital support colleague or coach. And I also have 2 children in the school system, so I'm kind of seeing both sides of this from the parent and the teacher and support.
Teresa and I have pretty much the same story. I came from the classroom also. I have 3 children in our school district, 2 in high school and 1 in elementary school. And I have also had to balance my work from home situation with helping with schooling. So I'll be able to chime in a lot with parent support.
So you can see we've definitely leveraged a lot of our folks. So a lot of our team members have had students. So some of them became guinea pigs, I think, for some of the systems that we were trying to put together and support. So that's been a huge benefit. And I think that's part of the success that we've had is really having a broad spectrum of folks having input. So our hope with the session today is to just share our experience on how we went about supporting parents and how we kind of worked through. I think one of the things as we were prepping for this is, I think pretty common is, we're all flying a plane that's still being put together and wondering what parts and pieces are the most important. And I think kind of the key to a lot of this is our parents in supporting virtual learning really are those wheels on that plane. It's not taking off and it's not landing until those pieces are in place. So those became a lot of the conversations around how we got started. Hopefully, as we kind of go through it, we're gonna talk through the systems that we had in place, the systems that we had to put in place, and then put our parent hat on and talk through all of those different scenarios of, does a parent also trying to work? Are both parents trying to work with students, which is also the case that I was in, or that most of the team has been in. So to kind of go through it, we started, like most districts, with our instructional continuity plan and putting those pieces in place, and a lot of work with our teaching and learning team on what that was going to look like. And I think Flagler, we were pretty fortunate at this time, because we have a lot of the systems and things that that we already had in place. Flagler, we've had our one-to-one program for almost 10 years that's been in place. So some of the shifts that needed to take place, we already had some of those key components already there. So some of the conversations that we were able to have early on were not necessarily about surveying parents to know who had what device and what comfort level they were already at. We had a pretty good idea with that already. So when we got started, a lot of those conversations kind of veered right off into what software and systems do we have in place. But the bigger question was, how do we turn those around? Because I think in schools, we're all very used to supporting teachers and students when they're in our buildings in that brick and mortar environment. And it really took a lot of thinking and pushing through of how do we flip that now that we don't have students. We can't call them down to the tech office to repair a device. We're not sure about bandwidth issues that students are having. How are we going to communicate with those students where we're used to being able to have direct communication with a teacher and pull them? So those were all some pretty big conversations to be had. I think if you want to chime in, Maria, a little bit on kind of the early conversations about how we were going to ensure that we had those systems started up.
Certainly. I think some of our big conversations was putting into place how we could communicate and get that communication out, working with our schools too, so that they were trying to answer to their parents and their students at their schools. So as Ryan said, it was really great. We jumped on right away, being in technology and used to kind of brainstorming and communicating by our video conferences too, and putting in place some of the pieces of our call center that we'll get into details with some stories, and getting our own staff in place and getting ready to handle those phone calls and triaging a few layers so that we could start answering questions to the community, to the parents, and actually even to our own teachers in the school. We did learn early on that having our one-to-one was a huge help, but we didn't have our K-3 students taking the devices home. So what we needed to do was we needed to find a way to quickly put into place a way to get them out and notify parents to be able to come and pick those devices up and have them ready and have them with the apps needed, and to be able to have the call center in place so when those devices went home and there were questions after they went home, that we would be able to handle those and get those all working. We have teachers that were put into a new role. Virtual learning is very different than having them in your classroom, which Amy and Teresa will talk to you about that piece. We also recognized that we were going to need some hotspots for some of the families that did not have internet access at home. So those were all pieces that we identified, how we were going to get this together and do it in a relatively very quick turnaround. Everybody came together really well. So the majority of our 7 to 12th grade students did have already devices. The ones that didn't, we knew that we were going to reach out to those students as well. So then we put into place our distributions that we would have our drive-bys and they would come in to pick it up. But I guess, sorry, I'm going to back up a little, because what we originally started in order to do that was we put in our call center, and we immediately had our techs answering the help desk tickets. And what we had was our IS department and a few other departments roll in with the Avaya app. And I don't know, Ryan, if you want to talk more about the Avaya app now, or if I just roll into that story of how we put that in place.
Do we want to give a little bit more about the background where we started? Like, we kind of went over our devices, what we've had in place already. And then we had some of the software there ready in place, like our learning management system we had out through K-12, so they were able to use that, and our single sign-on as far as the students logging in. So we had some of those systems in place, and we had the Avaya phone system in place at our physical building, but we hadn't really used that piece, the workplace, bringing it out yet.
And I was going to say, Teresa, once we got those devices out, these were the pieces that were key for
Yes.
keeping us going.
Definitely. And that they were familiar with these already before we started. So these were the same software systems they were using in the classroom, brick and mortar. The teachers were used to them, had some training, so that really helped.
And the parents were not. So those were the ones that we were guiding through these with our call center to help them learn a lot more of our systems that were in place for Schoology, for instance.
And then our basic support that we had in system before we went to this is we had a school tech at each school physically and a physical help desk. We had coaches, that myself and Amy and Kristen, who were able to reach out to the teachers and work with the students. But as far as our parent support, we had a few parent nights, but not very good attendance with that. And we had some basic information on the website for them. So once all of this, we shifted to the virtual online learning, we had to make some changes.
So I think one of the biggest questions when we talked about pulling together and getting support and kind of taking those internal systems and pointing them, out to parents was trying to figure out how to manage the amount of calls coming in. Obviously, having technicians in each individual school is fantastic. I know I talked to a lot of districts that struggle with that as well. But how then do we get them access to homes and families? So those were a lot of the other conversations that happened with some of our technicians. How we managed to actually scale this out to really be able to cover it was deploying out and extending our call center system. And I know we were talking a little bit of Avaya, but really any IP-based phone system really can accomplish this. What it amounts to is we were able to put soft phones or your phone extension on your remote devices. So essentially virtually being able to pick up your phone that was on your desk and place it anywhere, whether you were working from home, or in an individual office. It gave you that flexibility. So we were able to take all of those extensions that folks were used to working on, put them into a call pool. So now when the phone calls were coming in, we were able to put 20, 30, up to 40 people for Flagler answering calls when parents were calling them in. And part of what they were doing is initially a lot of conversations and trying to find out who to connect them with. So, that was kind of a big aha, was how are we going to communicate internally as well? So, when you've got 20 or 30 additional folks that you brought in that are really just calling, triaging calls or answering phone calls, we really looked at what our resources were and how to leverage them. We didn't necessarily want technicians that could be fit, helping parents with devices, answering phone calls, taking information. So we really just didn't have enough folks to be able to accomplish it. So we recruited folks from all over our district to help participate in that, and many of them did very, very well. So the piece that I think that was neat about the call center was on the back end, it started with a lot of emails all back and forth. And I don't know how many of you guys, when we started with virtual learning, but just could not figure out how to communicate with everybody. You had email, you're getting text messages on your phones, you get internal communications potentially from systems that you have in place. And then trying to figure out what the norms are that how folks are going to communicate. And when you've got large amounts of communications going back and forth, it just became overwhelming, almost a little bit of anxiety almost of making sure that you didn't drop the ball with something. So those were some great conversations that the team had about how to improve the back end communications, because you put 30, 40 people out there that are working from home into a virtual call center. how are they going to communicate when they get issues that come in? Like if a parent comes in and we don't have something that's already built out to be able for them to respond, how are they doing it, and who are they getting in contact with? So we previously were already using a software called Slack, which is used in a lot of different environments, but really Slack started off supporting a lot of development companies. So software development companies, that kinds of stuff, have used it for quite some time, particularly around like remote support and remote work. So we brought those folks into our Slack system and then gave them some basic training, and that allowed them to kind of back channel or have conversations behind the scenes. So while they were on the phone talking to parents, they were keying information into our Slack channels, and then that allowed us from the back end to kind of triage what was happening. So we were able to get tickets put in a very large volume that addressed concerns that parents were having, but it also allowed, when we had a solution for a particular issue or an avenue for them to go with that particular problem, it then allowed everyone to communicate directly in real time instead of having to chug back through email after email to try and follow. So I don't know if you've ever worked through issues with email and you go, man, there's 20 something emails in this string before we got to a solution. That narrows that down so that you can get into and just follow along that particular issue or item. So it kind of breaks those out and allows everybody to view and participate in those. I really feel like that was a key component of what allowed our help desk system, that forward-facing piece for our parents, family, to be successful. It allowed us to scale that up, communicate effectively internally, and then as tickets went up and down, folks could kind of work back to what a little bit of what their traditional work was.
And then I think too, it helped that they were actually talking to a real person. So they called and it was a friendly voice that answered and was somewhat soothing. And if they didn't know the answer, they knew how to get someone else who's going to call them right back. We also added the Zoom or a web conferencing platform. And we initially thought it would mainly be used in the classroom for teaching, but we actually used it quite a bit when we were helping the parents or the students too, because we were able to then sometimes even Zoom with the person so that we could see their screen and walk them through, the solution or showing them where to go. So the kind of a combination between that web conferencing software, and then we had a remote console. So we were able to remote into those devices when we were talking to them on the phones. We still had the personal interaction, but we're able to help from afar. So I think those two pieces were both things that were instrumental in this as well. And then we came to the problem of, well, if there's a device out there and we weren't able to fix it or help with it, kind of what was the next step? So that kind of comes back to our distribution. Amy, do you want to kind of tell how that worked some?
Yeah, if you just want to go back one slide and I'll quickly catch everyone up. But, as we said before, initially when we already had in place, basically our fourth grade through 12th grade already had devices for the most part at home, except for maybe a few day users with devices here and there. But when COVID hit, we were actually on spring break. So everyone left school without us knowing. Had we known, we could have sent devices home with everyone, but that wasn't the case. So we had to come up with how we were going to get devices out to all of our K through 3 students. So we kind of came up with, Maria had mentioned it earlier, of our little drive-through distribution. So they pulled through a car. They told us the school name and grade. We got them a device, logged them into the apps, the crucial apps that they needed, and then they went on. During that time, we also handed out like our hotline number and everything. So the parents that left there left with how they could contact us when they needed help, because it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. The internet access, we had already had grants initially for our 7th grade through 12th grade to be able to get Wi-Fi hotspots if they were in need. But during COVID, that opened to offer it through all of our grade levels, K through 12. We also added additional providers, especially for our rural areas where our initial providers didn't reach. So we added more providers, and then we increased the data for those in need, along with putting out information about their own cable companies offering special pricing through the COVID time. Lastly, with their devices, we offered them to some of our support staff that may not have initially needed devices when they were in the classroom with the students, like our paraprofessionals. So we offered set up devices so they could come pick up devices. So then they were in new roles as well, which they needed as much support as the parents did because they weren't used to having to go into some of those programs that the kids were using.
And then as we were talking to parents, if they needed to change out a physical device, as we continued, we would have these kind of weekly. So we had a spot where they were able to come and we would take the device that we couldn't repair remotely. We would kind of quarantine that device and then we would issue them a new device at these same drop-off locations. And if they couldn't make that time, we would work between people. Like Amy made a lot of appointments and met people one-on-one. Our admin reached out to parents and they were making house visits to quite a few people that couldn't make it into these pickups as well.
And kind of how our,
go
ahead, Maria.
Thank you, Amy. I was going to say too, I think the other piece of this too was a lot of the relationships that we built through the distributions. I know that Amy has increased her best friend list to quite a few parents who have her email and would just feel comfortable emailing her. But I found that we did have a few people that not only would they use this as their distributions, but as they were familiar with the times in the pull-up, they would come up and we could actually walk them through sometimes an issue or a problem that they would have with the software and be able to send them on their way feeling pretty confident. And even sometimes just listening, because at the very beginning, the parents were just as frustrated as the students were trying to get some of their work done. So sometimes it was good to just be able to have that contact.
And then I think too, we kept our teachers informed of what was going on because they had that contact with the parents and kind of shared with them common troubleshooting things that they could help walk the parents through too. So, they were able to help because obviously, we went from supporting just our students and teachers to now we have all of our students, teachers, and parents, and we just didn't have the manpower just ourselves. So we needed to bring other people in.
And one other thing that we really, kind of a challenge that we had to overcome during all this is we had just certain populations, our ELL populations and things like that of people that originally I was in charge of filtering through this online form to be able to see like who needed devices, who needed Wi-Fi. And so many times they would just answer in Spanish or whichever language they were speaking at home. And I couldn't speak that. So we had to reach out to our entire district on who could help us answer those questions so those parents felt involved and that they weren't just getting lost in the process. So we put in place different interpreters and things like that to help us with those parents and making sure that they understood how their children were going to be accessing devices or software or anything like that. So that was another big piece that we had to help those parents that necessarily didn't speak English or had special needs as well.
Yeah, I think Amy, to kind of touch on that was a pretty big a pretty big issue when we had early on, and definitely working with Amy and a couple other folks from the team. We reached out actually to all of our departments because we did have multiple folks across departments that were willing to help us. So we actually brought them in to kind of help support through that call center as well. So we were able to get, a third party or an interpreter on the line sometimes when we were sitting and talking with parents and sometimes grandparents who had a language barrier with the folks that we had in place to respond. So there were multiple scenarios and of having a technician on the line with someone from our food service or custodial services team who were sitting and doing some interpreting and things for us. Because I don't know, obviously with being remote, a lot of those folks weren't necessarily in schools, at least in Flagler, cleaning or doing lunch duty with those. So that was a really huge thing. It was an awesome opportunity. And I think those are some of the little things that you need to make sure, like from your district perspective, that everybody can play a part with those when we're talking about with those relationships. Because I know I had a couple of conversations where, you've got parents with a language barrier, and it is such an ease or such an improvement when you can actually get on the phone with someone who is speaking Spanish or Portuguese or Russian, where you don't necessarily have those barriers in place. So that's definitely something that was a big takeaway for us.
And I kind of think that, you know, our students, when they're in our classrooms, are used to things constantly changing and learning new things. Our teachers are used to learning new things. Even though this was a new change for them, they still know how to go through that process. Our parents, on the other hand, don't, because we handle all of that when we're in our schools. So I think at the beginning, it was a little bit of panic with our parents. And so I think our main concern was how many people can get a hold of as many parents as possible to make sure that we calm the panic instead of adding to the panic.
And I think too, the parents had to learn that their kids could do a lot. I know many times you would be talking to a parent trying to walk them through it, and the student's like, Mom, I know how to do that. And sometimes it was, could you put me on speakerphone and let's have you guys go through it together, and kind of let the student take the role and have them follow through. And we did also work to kind of be proactive to some of these things. As we were gearing up to get started through spring break, we came up with a list of what do you think parents are going to need to know how to do, and we started making how-to videos, just real short 1-minute clips, and shared those out with parents and with teachers. And we used them at the call center too to be able to send directions out. You know, if they were having an issue, how do I log into here? How do I upload an assignment? We were trying to put some of those materials together ahead of time and continued to add to them as things came up also.
And I'll kind of just share a quick personal story. So I'm busy working in technology and trying to aid all the parents and the students and the teachers in our district. Yet my husband, who was furloughed with his position and was at home, and my 4th grader who was doing schoolwork, I constantly am hearing the arguing and the fighting. And because my husband knows exactly what he's supposed to be doing, but my child is arguing that he knows what he's supposed to be doing. And finally, I just had to say, like, let him do it. He knows, the student knows how to do it. And as soon as the parent, my husband, had stepped away, everything got a lot calmer in our home, because the students do know the programs that they're using, and the teachers were giving that instruction to them through Zooms or through their daily meetings with the children.
I saw a question come in asking about some of the examples and things. We also added, if you want to go to our website, which is flaglerschools.com, we added a whole COVID section on there. And in there, we added those resources. So that's where we had those to do, you know, the how-to sheets. And we would try to write it out in instructions they could read, and also include the video clip. And we kind of kept that up as we've moved on. Before all of this started, we also had in our technology pages kind of a page for parents, and we've been updating that page as well. So if you'd like to see any of the resources and things that we've used, if you'll just go to flaglerschools.com, you can look there and see some of the things that we've put together. We've shared a lot of them up on YouTube also, so then parents were able to just access them through there as well.
And actually, the parents were the ones from the phone calls that drove us to which ones were the most needed. So that's how we arrived at the ones that are on our website, were the most asked questions, the most sought out answers. And I did want to just add one thing, kind of going back to the drive-through. I know that at the beginning, Ryan thought we need just one command center, if you would. So we adopted one location. And I think that was really important, because that's where all of our devices were. That's where all the parents knew that was that continuity. They knew where to come, or what our times were at that particular spot. And we had everything that we needed, and we wouldn't have to shuffle from one place to another. And I think that helps. I think that's been Amy's like second house that she's kind of lived at for a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think the advantage of doing that, or you know, instead of trying to do these support systems from every single school, but doing clusters or centralized or feeder patterns, we were able to go and actually put a lot more Wi-Fi access points out. So where, you know, we would normally only have 1 or 2 access points covering a particular area, which in this particular case, we're using a bus loop with a media center that was directly attached with some covered walkway. We were able to go out as we had that week off, and we put several access points along those walkways, so that allowed us to really have some good Wi-Fi connection and good bandwidth out in those lanes in front of the media center there. So those were things that maybe to think about too when you're trying to deploy those devices and push them out. That's really key, to make sure that you've got plenty of bandwidth when you've got a few hundred cars sitting in front of a school trying to get devices to them.
And then, so as we're coming towards the end of this whole thing, we're starting to think about what do we need to keep in place or changes we need to make to be ready for the unknown of what's coming up for next year. And luckily, we're fortunate in Flagler County Schools. We're in a really good place when it comes to having the devices to support and be there for our students. But we're looking at some of the software systems that we've added, things that we're going to keep or improve on, and then also some of our support systems. I do know we have used the web conferencing platform. We ended up going with Zoom. We did increase to the Pro account pretty much right away to give us a little bit more control over that. We were able to add in the feature of being able to host our own webinars, and we've used that for a lot of we've done virtual professional learning for our teachers on that. We have also used it, some of our mental health professionals have used the webinars to have meetings with parents. So they'll have support meeting with their parent clusters, whether it be a Zoom meeting or webinar, to kind of reach out and soothe them that way. So that's another way we've reached out to kind of support the parents. We even have several of the licensed HIPAA compliant, and that's allowed some of our mental health counselors to be able to continue to work with those students and parents and families, because it's a stressful situation for everyone. So that's kind of worked. Ryan, do you want to touch on some of the other systems we'll be keeping?
Well, I think moving forward with that has allowed us to continue having those parents be more involved, even when we go back to a brick and mortar model. Those parents, if we can use the Zoom and they can come in on an IEP or a 504 or any sort of meeting that they may not have been able to take off work for and get to a school, but now may be able to, we can utilize that where they can take a break at work and jump on a meeting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, those are huge points. We've identified many different ways of using the web conferencing platform. I think even our education foundation has transitioned their Take Stock program, and they were utilizing the Zoom in the breakout rooms. So they're going in, getting put into the breakout rooms and monitored for some of those mentoring programs. So we were able to maintain the continuity there with those Take Stock kids. So I think that was a pretty neat use of that as well. I think kind of the point of talking about kind of what the next steps or where this goes is, there's so much unknown going forward. The questions about what brick and mortar looks like next year, what hybrid models look like, what does that look like? So what we've done is kind of taken what we've learned so far and started putting those what if scenarios now and kind of leading things forward. I think the key to a lot of this is the flexibility and the ability with the call center. I think that is something that's going to be here to stay. We've already begun expanding that beyond just support for virtual learning, but also generalized support when we have parents calling questions about maybe IEP supports or additional programs that we've got, or trying to have questions about what courses do I need to take for registration, because I think everybody, if you have been dealing with some virtual registration and those types of things. So a lot of those programs have been shifted that way, and we see a real advantage to keeping those systems up and in place. The IP phone system, I think most districts have those types of systems in place, but whether they're leveraging the way that is best is maybe not the case. So it might be one of those things that's worthwhile talking to your IT folks about what kind of phone system does it support remote connection, so that essentially you have that opportunity to take it, on your personal phone or on your, a computer, and giving you that flexibility to be able to move back and forth without, call forwarding and all of those kinds of things.
Because I think the flexibility was a big thing. And I know when we first started, teachers were like, okay, I'm going to Zoom at 9 o'clock. And then we're going to have, they were trying to follow the regular structure of the school day. And that's not really possible. Everyone's, parents may be working during the day and the student might be doing their learning at night with the parents' help. So the teachers and us had to learn to be flexible as well. So like our call center hours, they extended after work hours. So that way they were able to call in. So if you had parents working, we would be open. At the beginning, we were open till 7 or 8 o'clock at night sometimes for them to be able to call in. And then as our calls kind of dropped down, we've kind of shortened our hours, but we're still available after typical work hours too.
And I know that making appointments with parents and when to meet them for either device exchanges or getting hotspots out to the parents, one of my first questions is, do you have a work schedule we need to work around? And so there's times where I'm meeting parents at 5:30 at night. We're at a school that's closest to their house versus, them having to come on our normal distribution days, which would have been Tuesdays. And so just being flexible to the situation that the parents were going through.
And then for moving forward next year, I think we're kind of looking at what, a hybrid type model. What did we have that worked best when we were in the school system? What have we learned from this experience now? And how can we put it together to make it be the best, moving forward? How are we going to combine those two things together?
And I do think everybody's mind set has changed a bit too. I think even our teachers with our parents, everybody working together, what we thought pre-COVID or just the beginning weeks of that has really changed, and we have made those adjustments as we've worked through it. I know that even taking some of those call centers, and once you start to talk to the parents and really feel their frustrations, it kind of helped lead us in certain paths that maybe we didn't think about at the very beginning.
And we took our support people and kind of broke them up into teams. So when the parents would call in, and the first person those people would know who to direct it to based on the issues that they were having. Like, was it a hardware issue? Was it a software issue? And we kind of had specialized teams that would help solving those particular areas. So that way we could get back to them in a more timely manner. At the beginning, it was overwhelming. We had a lot of calls coming in right at the beginning, but now we've kind of gotten into the groove of things. And I think everyone's a little bit more comfortable.
And even in a little humorous way, I think we know some of the names of people that just like to call every week, kind of a check-in, so that we can even help when it's a user issue, which is okay.
Does anyone have any questions or anything they can share in either chat or the Q&A that we'll have time to answer? I do know our virtual professional learning sessions we've done with the teachers have been a big hit. And I know we're even starting to use some of those with parents as we're planning to move forward. Like one of our schools is having our typical kindergarten roundup that we would have at the schools is being hosted virtually via Zoom. So we're looking at some of our promotion ceremonies that they would be having at school are going to be done that way as well. So we're kind of, adapting and making changes with that, still trying to make the best of it and getting feedback from parents along the way too. Like, what do they want to see? How do they want it? What do they think would be best?
Yeah, I know that even some of our administrators, or not if all of them, are now even having their faculty meetings so that they're keeping in contact with their teachers on a regular basis using Zoom. So I see that our names are all up there with our email addresses. If you have any questions that you can't think of yet, you can always feel free to email us.
Definitely. I see someone mentioned that today their school's offering their first virtual parent training and excited to see how it goes. They've done really well in our district. I know it kind of started out with one of our middle schools and they're still continuing to do it. I think it's just a place for them to go and ask questions and to see. So hopefully yours will go really well too in your district. And it's maybe something else we can continue on next year, because I know we had issues with parents showing up at our event. So maybe we'll try them virtually and see if that goes better.
Well, I know our principals have been doing a lot of that, and I'm not sure if any of you have been doing it or not, but kind of a virtual coffee with the principal or you kind of do an end of the day wrap up with the principal. So it kind of depends on the school that you're talking about. But we've seen several of our elementary schools where they have a little more time in the morning, that they're doing that coffee with the principal. I think any opportunity, I think that the biggest thing that we've taken away is the biggest opportunity is for having some more personal interaction with families, because
Yeah.
so much of the time we get overwhelmed with just the number of folks potentially that you're talking about. If if you're in a school with even 1,000 students, the number of families to be able to reach out to. And we all know that parents kind of get numb to the constant barrage of automated phone calls that go out. So that has been a big struggle with how do you balance with getting information out, and then making sure that you're not addressing something that needs to get addressed. But those have been key takeaways. Making sure that you've got some personal touch to those to interact with parents is key, because the last thing everybody wants to have to deal with is when you get one or two parents that get vocal on social media or whatnot. So it's great to kind of get ahead of those and be able to have conversations and one-on-one to be able to resolve them. And a lot of times it's just a level of frustration. And I think what you've seen over the course of the last few months is just that. There's just so many pressures that are on our families that are trying to be teachers at home, working from home, and that, a lot of times folks that are communicating with them are the front line and the first ones to kind of see that. So that's been really a big takeaway.
And I know the families that I have personally been in contact with, which have been a lot over those last few months, are very appreciative of just you taking a breath and listening to their story and helping, just saying, anything you need, we're here, and knowing that they have an email or a phone number or wherever they can call instead of having to sit and wait for someone to get back to them or this and that. I think it just really made their transition as parents a little bit easier when, like Ryan said, they're going through so many stressors. Maybe they didn't have a paycheck coming in and they don't know how to feed their children and all these other stressors that we can't control. I think it was important that the ones that we can, like helping them with the technology side of things, was a very big comfort for them.
Definitely. We did have someone ask, I know they're going to share out our slide presentation with everyone that attended, so they'll be sharing that out with you guys. And again, you can contact any of us via email if you have any questions or need us to follow up. We'll be happy.
Flagler team, this is Nate Davis from Apple Education. I just want to thank you guys for sharing your story. It's so impressive how you've met your community and stakeholders' needs in such a sense of urgency and in such a short period of time. So just want to commend you guys and thank you guys so much today for spending the time presenting for us.
Thank you for having us.
Are there any other questions? You can submit your questions in the chat or the Q&A. And of course, your exit ticket has been provided. I've just resent it again. So you'll see that in the chat as well. If you're not in the chat, X as in X-ray, F as in Frank, T-R-E-Y is the exit ticket. Again, X-F-T-R-E-Y. Okay. We'll give them a moment if someone's typing.
Certainly.
I know personally, having two at home, this was very helpful.
That's nice to hear. Thanks.
Thank you for your guidance here.
Brings back a lot of memories as you forget as you started putting it all together.
Well, and having multiple language as well.
Yes.
Well, All right, well, we'll give it another minute or two if there are any other questions.
Okay.
And of course, as shared, you can find resources on the FASA Zoom platform where the conference is being hosted. And you can also enter, of course, your exit ticket there to receive credit for your participation today. Also there is where you'll find any of the presentations that are posted from your sessions as well. We hope that you continue to share with your network via whatever platform that you use, the conference, hashtag FASA CONF, and that you'll share your experiences so that others will be encouraged as well. Next session will be at 2 p.m. today, and that will be leading from distance on the same platform. Well, I want to thank our panelists, Ryan, Maria, Amy, and Teresa from Flagler County Schools. Wonderful job. And of course, they've provided their information. At the bottom of the screen, you can see how to contact them via email, or of course, I'm sure their information is on the district website as well. I want to thank them for leading this session today, and Kelly Education is glad to be a part of this session as well. So thank you for your time, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.